and skiing,
Sorry.
traveling, those things. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how you manage diabetes with your activities as well.
Yes,
Oh,
and there's
very, very needy puppy, so I'm gonna go take her out.
love it.
Mhm.
So cute. Okay. Um, yeah, so I'll jump in, and if you have questions, feel free to just stop me or signal Sydney because I probably won't be able to see you while I'm presenting. So here we go. Wait, hold on. Let me put it back to the beginning before I start this. Okay. Do this. Okay. So I know we've used Zoom forever now, but can everyone see it? The standard question just give me awesome. Okay. So I wanted to talk about travel and kind of adventuring, but come from a practical approach to have successful adventures. And when I say adventures, an adventure is something that is can be just like a toe outside of your comfort zone. So something new or something big and grand, right? So, Alexis, you mentioned going to Florida. So maybe normally before diabetes, that, wasn't necessarily this huge, whoa, adventure, but you add diabetes into the mix and it's brand new. So that is a big step outside the comfort zone, right? And Emma, maybe you're planning something new you've never done before, or maybe like I'm picturing dance competition. Well, maybe now you're going to a full weekend and it's now 2 full days. You're doing like every type of dance and it's full on compared to maybe just a studio um, recital or something like that. So maybe right? So it can vary. So I already told you a little bit kind of about me, but my sort of professional background is I'm a health coach, a registered kinesiologist, and I'm a certified diabetes educator. And but the more exciting thing is that I spend a lot of time outside and doing activities. I love doing activities. That's I don't really have hobbies other than doing activities and sports and outdoor adventures. So I'm a wilderness first responder, meaning if you get hurt in the wild, I can help you. I'm a certified alpine ski instructor and coach, a national certified coach. I have my advanced open water scuba diver. I lead canoe trips, and I'm a lead retreat facilitator. I also swim. I never danced, but I used to ski race growing up, so that was a big deal for me. And I was diagnosed when I was 11, so I was a kid, and I've had it for a really long time. So a little bit older probably than you both, but yeah. So I'm gonna chat a little bit. I'm gonna show you some of the adventures that I do. Talk a little bit about open versus closed sport, and Emma, this might make sense to you for what you do because dance is actually a closed sport because you don't have to deal with the environment. Talk a little bit about risk assessment and management. And we know with diabetes, and Alexis, I'm sure you're learning this every moment of every day. You're assessing risk for absolutely everything and trying to plan. So that basically we kind of just take that same concept into the outdoors and into the activities we want to do. And then we'll talk about kind of your adventures, your dreams, your goals, your questions, and hopefully can help each other answer them. So these are just a couple of my little adventures of things that I like to do. That's a shark. So a little bit about that. I know we went, so I'll talk about sort of winter and summer. So in the winter, I spend a lot of time on the snow, cross country skiing, alpine skiing, mostly alpine skiing. I go every single weekend. It's the love of my life. I absolutely just love it. As well as skating and snowshoeing. It's loads of fun. In the summertime, I have kind of a wider variety of activities, but mostly it's cycling, whether that's road cycling, mountain biking, and then anything to do with a paddle. So stand up paddle boarding, canoeing, kayaking, And also intermixed with that is hot yoga. It's one of my new passions. I'm not very flexible, so hot yoga is really helpful with that. So yeah, I've done a variety of things. And swimming, sorry, I forgot about swimming. I just love it. So I do lots of different things. And so Alexis, if you have questions about the ocean and pump sites or what, we can talk about that. So why I want to talk about closed and open sports. Closed sports are those things that you really don't have to think about the environment. So it kind of you take away those aspects. So dance is a closed sport. So you're looking for perfection and discipline. Um, Swimming is another one in a pool, right? So you're not really having to think much about sort of the external environment because that's very controlled. So it actually, with diabetes, it makes it a little bit easier. You still have things like nerves, and the length and duration of the activity you're doing, but you don't have to deal with the elements. You don't have to really deal with other people, and the intensity. You'd set the intensity versus the environment setting it for you. Um, and so most of our outdoor adventure activities are those open sports, so it has even more factors that we have to deal with. So um, swimming in a pool versus swimming in an ocean are two different things, right? So swimming in an ocean, you're thinking about the actual weather outside. You're thinking about the sun is going to have an impact, whether you're in salt water, and the waves and the current, where you don't have to think about that in a pool. So it might be a little bit harder to deal with in terms of diabetes management in the ocean versus a swimming pool. So that's kind of like why I wanted to just distinguish between the two. And sometimes it's a little bit easier to start with activities that are a little more in that controlled environment and then bring it to things a little more complex. So something I like to think about, and these two questions actually deal with every aspect of diabetes, right? Whether that's going to school, hanging, playing with friends, or even if you're thinking about climbing Mount Everest, like these two questions will get you through anything. So what situations could arise and how can I mitigate those risks? So taking a moment to sit down and literally thinking about all the things that could happen, and then thinking, okay, well, what do I need either to help mitigate those risks from happening, from actually occurring, or if they do occur, what am I going to do? How am I going to manage that? So a really great example is I use an insulin pump and I'm traveling. What if my pump breaks? Basic one, right? I need to bring my backup injections and pens. And that situation happens in every aspect of our lives, whether you're on a mountainside, you're in a canoe, or you're going to school, or you're spending the night somewhere, right? Or you're going away for a week vacation. You have to think about those things. So a lot of the basic stuff that we deal with on a day-to-day basis actually applies to all of the adventures that we do. They just might be a little more complex. This is my motto. You plan, 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 and plan some more. So, if you think about worst case scenarios, like the more you plan, the better you are at identifying potential things that can go wrong. If you don't plan and you're flying by the seat of your pants, guaranteed you'll forget something. So, Alexis, as you get more into it, you'll realize you're going to become a planner extraordinaire if you aren't already, in thinking about things and having little packs of things ready to go in all your different scenarios. And I will share a story about glucagon that really changed my life, and I'll share that at the end with you all. So risk versus reward is something I like to think about. So for example, like I love skiing, and one of my goals is to go heli skiing. That's a big risk, but it's also a really big reward, a really big payoff for that. But there's a lot I have to think about. Now, if I was a first time skier, am I going to go heli skiing? Absolutely not, right? That doesn't make any sense to do that. But I've been skiing for about 40 years. So that is something that's totally in my wheelhouse. But there are things I have to think about in order to prep for that, in order not only to be successful at the sport of skiing, but also for diabetes management. So, what is your competence level? So, have you done it before? And who's going to be with you when you're doing it? And these are just some questions to kind of ask yourself. And do you have safety protocol in place? So depending on what you're doing, let's say you're going on a canoe trip, or you are going away on vacation. I say evac plan, meaning like if something happens, can you get yourself out of the situation? Um, what are your exit points? Do you have medical nearby? So this is a really great question for traveling out of state and out of network. If you need someone, what's your backup plan? Can you call your endocrinologist at home? Is there a clinic nearby that you can use? And thinking about those things ahead of time. Does anyone have first aid training or specific training necessary to the adventures that you're planning? What are your strategies to deal with adverse outcomes? Because those absolutely will happen. You can plan for everything and you're still going to have an adverse outcome. So I like to kind of bring it back to the basics. And again, this is where I say all of those planning stages in day to day life help you in those more adventurous activities because they're the foundation. So food, lows, highs, tech malfunctions, right? Weather and temperatures. What will you do if these are compromised? And do you have experience with this? So, one of the big ones I like to put an asterisk beside is tech malfunctions because we sometimes assume that our devices are always going to work. They don't. They sometimes fail you at the worst times. So having to plan for that. And sometimes the plan is as simple as, well, I know I can go to a pharmacy and get what I need, right? But if you're, out of cell service in the mountains, let's say, at a retreat, maybe getting out of the mountain to go to a pharmacy is not it's not going to happen, and maybe it's nighttime. So what do I need to plan and prepare for if my tech dies, right? So that would be having like backup pens, right? Or having my CGM, but bringing a meter with some strips just in case. So some of those ideas, I know we think meters, we don't want those anymore, but sometimes they come in handy. Sometimes they do. So I think actually, yeah. Do you want to talk about scuba diving? Is that something you're interested in, or would you rather talk about something else?
No, I
Sure.
think,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So I did scuba diving because it's this extreme example, right? It's not something that everyone does, but you can take lessons away from this and how I went about planning to actually be a successful at scuba diving and manage my diabetes. I've never, knock on wood, I've never had a low while diving. And I've always come up in a safe range. There's only been one time where I had to say I can't dive, and I'll tell you about that in a second. That was a hard decision, but I'm proud of myself for doing it. So scuba diving, so let's assess the risk and how are we going to manage it. So obviously scuba diving without diabetes is a risky activity. It's an extreme sport. So there is an organization called DAN, or Divers Alert Network, and they actually have criteria now for people living with type 1. And basically you need to meet this criteria if you want to scuba dive. And the most basic one is that your A1C is under 9%. And you can't do any scuba diving in caves. For obvious reasons, you can't come out, right? If you needed to quickly, you can't. So, one of the questions I ask myself every time I go scuba diving, and this is before I leave, is do I still meet the criteria? Because there is criteria with regards to complications, to how you're managing your diabetes, as well as right A1C, things like that. So if you have retinopathy, you can't scuba dive. If you have kidney problems, you can't scuba dive because of the high pressure that you experience when you dive down. So it's knowing that and knowing and once, like, I just want to say too, once you assess your risk for something, it doesn't mean, okay, cool, check that off the box, I'm done. It's every time you go out. So it's every time I go skiing, it's every time I do these activities, and to varying degrees, right? I'm still going to assess, hey, how am I feeling today? Am I up for this? Do I have what I need? So it's not kind of a set in stone kind of thing. So know your dive cutoffs. And so as I mentioned before, there was only one time I didn't dive, but so these are my personal ones, and these are hard cutoffs. These are when I say, today is not the day, I'm not diving today. And it doesn't matter whether I've paid for my dive and I'm literally sitting on the boat in all my dive gear and I'm ready to go. It's kind of like, Emma, if you were about to go out on stage and dance, if your blood sugar is 41, and you can't go, right? You need to treat that low. And it sucks, right? It really sucks. But it's those cutoffs that we have to have. And with scuba diving, you got to kind of think ahead. So, oh, American, right. Okay, so I'm in millimole over here. Okay, so my blood sugar, I can't have a down arrow. So I can't be at 180 dropping down. That's a no-go. No active insulin on board, because we all know that that's things can happen, right? Not above 12, which I believe is 150. Sydney, am I right? 150?
I just Googled it and it said like 215.
Okay, wow, I was way off. Okay, so my blood sugar can't be over 215 and not below 6, which is like 120.
I think like
Yeah.
100.
No. 100's 5.5. I know that.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's like, it's, yeah, just under 120. So those are my hard cutoffs. So I basically have to be in this like very tight range and not dropping and not a, sorry, I should have added not a double up arrow. So if I'm, 150 with a double up arrow, that's not going to be good because I got to take my pump off. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into this before I actually get into the water. The next one is, so on every dive, you have someone called a dive master. They are the ones organizing the dive. They are in charge, kind of the buck stops with them. They lead the dive. So tell my dive master. So there is a signal, it's an L, right? That's right, an L, that you give them that means low blood sugar. So they know the sign. So if I'm under the water and I'm having a low blood, you can't talk, right? Everything is done by symbols. So low blood sugar, this means I'm not feeling well. So low blood sugar going up. So they know the signals. We've communicated this before. There's something called a safety stop where you 5 meters below the surface or like 150 feet, you have to stop and you have to do something called a deep decompression. You have to wait there for 5 minutes. So you can't just like fly up to the surface. So thinking about that ahead of time. But the dive master knows the signals and kind of is aware of what's happening, that I have diabetes and that I have a low plan. So in my vest that inflates and deflates, I have a gel, or usually 2 gels tucked up in there. So, and those are about 30 grams of carbs. So if I'm feeling that I'm going low, I know I can take it out, open it up, squeeze it all in, still breathe and still be okay, but I've got carbs in my system. Understanding that I probably won't feel low in the same way under the water as I will on the surface. So if I am feeling low, I'm probably lower than I think I am. So it's sort of using that, oh, I feel a bit low, I'm probably low, suck that back. Practice first in a safe environment. So I've done all this in a pool, so I know how to do it. I know how to have the gel. I know how to sort of have my snacks and ready to go under the water. And then glucagon is on the boat, and my buddy, you always dive with a partner, and they're called your buddy. My buddy knows how to use it, as well as the dive master knows what to do. So that is like even before I set foot on the boat, it's having all of these plans in place so that, okay, if I'm low, this is what I'm gonna do. Now for highs, because a dive is usually only about an hour, having a high blood sugar, I'm gonna come up, I'm gonna come out of the water, I'm gonna give some insulin, I'm gonna kind of manage that. That's not really that big of a deal, but lows are the far more important thing to manage. So that's before getting in the water. This is usually like a couple weeks before, or knowing that I'm diving and I'm calling ahead to like figure out who my dive master is. So, but how do I know all these things? How did I get all this information? I didn't just pick it out of thin air. So there's kind of 3 things: is similar exercise, getting trained, and asking others. So similar exercise. So obviously I'm a swimmer and I know how my body reacts to swimming. That's like one of the most important things. So if the water's super cold, I did a dive in Ontario and I had this very thick wetsuit and I couldn't move my arms. I had someone else have to zip me up because it was so thick. So figuring out like, okay, if we're under the water, you're gonna have to give me my snack because I won't be able to reach it. But I know that being in that cold water, my body is using so much more energy to stay warm. So I really need to cut back on my insulin and I really need to have more snack before I go in the water. When it's really warm, I'm totally okay. I just want to make sure I'm hydrated, right? So a couple different things. If there's a really strong current, that means I'm going to be working hard, going to be more active, kind of same thing. I need less insulin beforehand. Getting trained, that seems obvious, but at resorts, you can go and do sort of like this intro kind of dive. If you've done it, cool, but I think they're a little bit sketchy because it's just they're like, okay, let's just go, wee, it's fun, and like I want to, I'm super safety Sally, like I want to get trained, I want to make sure I know what I'm doing, and so I'm taking the training courses rather than something like that, and that's really with anything, you know, if I'm going on a big backcountry adventure or something like that. I'm not just going with a friend and we don't know what we're doing, right? Like I'm planning to go either with a group that has a guide or other people that have done it many times before if it's my first time. And then this is the big one, and this is similarly why you're here, is asking others. So people who have done it before you are the best um, people with information. This is better than your clinic. This is better than online. This is who you want to go to. So if there's any adventures that you want to do, um, talk to people around you, join a group, camp group, what have you. Talk to other moms, talk to other parents. They will give you amazing strategies to help you plan whatever it is you want to do. Um, Emma and Heather, are you planning any activities or adventures coming up for the summer?
Yeah, so we just got back from Hawaii.
Cool.
And I did a little snorkeling there. So that's
Amazing.
something that, not quite sure how to have something on her.
Yep.
Um, I don't personally swim, so my husband usually goes with her. And then we're doing a Caribbean cruise for spring
Cool.
break. And they do like put a helmet thing on and you go
Yep.
20 feet. Um, so I guess we've signed up for that excursion too. So
Yeah, so the helmet, and I've seen some really cool ones that look like a helmet in a motor. It's almost looks like a motorcycle. And that look they look
that's, yeah.
so amazing. Yeah, I actually I saw that last night on a documentary. But thinking about that, it how will you access glucose if you need it? Can you get it in your mouth?
That is a good question.
Right? So that might be something to go the day before or even like an hour or give them a call, like, hey, what happens if? Um, or that might even be a situation where you're balancing the risk versus benefit, right? So you're going to run higher, you know, you're only going to be in for 20 minutes, right? Making sure you have no active insulin on board, reducing basal, knowing that you're going to come out being with a high blood sugar, right? So it's not medical advice, but
Yeah.
that's probably what I would do, right? Um, and then like putting a gel, tucking it in your bathing suit or getting, you know, the little spy belts.
Mhm.
Do you guys have those? Yeah. So gels are really great. Like runner's gels is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because they're completely waterproof.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just kind of throw it in there and it looks not really cool to have the like the belt around you, but you know what? Oh, whatever. You do what you gotta do, right? Have your little belt with your stacks in there. So, your cool accessory. Because really, otherwise you can't kind of put it anywhere else. So, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Alexis, that's another tip for you all as well with swimming and whatnot, like getting the gels and putting them in a little like water. It doesn't even have to be a waterproof fanny pack, but there's something called a spy belt, and it's like a very small little tiny miniature belt. Um, and you can put stuff in there. But the gels are great because the water doesn't get in. So cool. All right, so the morning of my dive is very regimented and very precise. So breakfast or fasted, meaning I'm not eating anything. If I'm having breakfast, it's all protein, baby. There's no carbs. It's only protein, so I have no active insulin on board. Or I don't have anything because usually dives in the morning are quite early. Sometimes you're getting in at 6:30, 7 a.m., 8:30 at the latest kind of thing. So I don't have anything before, other than right before diving, I do a little tiny carb load with my devices. So obviously, you're going down quite deep. Your pump cannot go down with you. So the pump comes off. My sights and everything stay in, and my CGM stays on me and in, but obviously, it doesn't work. I have heard that people have tried Freestyle Libre and they bring it down in a waterproof case and it can scan. I don't know how accurate it is though. It's something worth trying. Or is anyone using Freestyle? Libre, or are you both Dexcoms?
Emma has
Yeah.
Dexcom and then Omnipod.
Okay, yeah. So the pod also, I know other people that have dove with the pod. I wouldn't dive with it on, because the pressure can squeeze insulin out, and that would be a very scary situation. So the pod would come off. I have a friend who dives, and she goes back to injections when she dives for the day before, because of that reason. So
And
Comes
Julie, sorry, I can pipe in real quick. I'm on Omnipod and I'm a diver as well.
Oh.
I always switch to injections when I dive. I personally, I would never dive with the Omnipod on.
yeah, Sydney, jump in when if you've got is this like similar to what you do, your prep? Yeah. Cool. So for me personally, I don't like to have no insulin on board because then I shoot up crazy high. So I usually have a 20% basal rate about an hour beforehand. And I actually don't use the AID system. I go back to manual because it then like it adjusts, and that's not what I want, right? I don't all of a sudden want, triple the amount of basal because it's trying to get me back into range because it's like, whoa, what's going on? So yeah, I go back to kind of manual mode just for the hour beforehand so I can manage my readings. And I'm going to watch the CGM arrows, and I'm going to manage accordingly. And again, if I'm out of those ranges and I'm shooting to the moon or I'm dropping really low, it's not happening. But I'm also going to have a meter with me with finger poke, because I'll let you know what happens afterwards. So then I'm going to know the conditions. So you have a dive meeting before you actually go. But you also know whether you're in a boat dive or shore dive. A boat dive is great because you just fall in off the boat into the water. But a shore dive, you got to haul all your stuff and walk in. So it's far more physical. So greater chance of going low. And tanks and everything, they're very heavy. So lugging those things across the shore is really difficult. So I really like to opt for boat dives personally, so I don't have to deal with that and I don't have to worry about it. But if I am going with a shore dive, literally right before I head in, I'm eating 30 grams of carb. So I'm having gummies or a juice box or something like that. And if it's a boat dive, I'm going to have 15 grams of carb just before. So I'm already like, I'm suited up and I'm ready to go. And I'm kind of throwing that stuff back, doing my checks, and then off we go. And that is regardless, this is unbolused snacks. So, and then I'm going to review with my buddy. So they know where my gel is. I know where my gel is. We know all the signals, and we're just reviewing it again right before we go in. And I'm making sure that we understand and we're communicating. And yeah, the glucagon is on the boat and they know that it's on the boat. Now, hopefully we go off and it's a super fantastic dive. We have a great time. But what happens after your dive? And I say morning of because dives always happen in the morning. They very rarely happen at other times unless you're doing multiple dives. So blood sugar, when you come out, like you have no idea what's happening down there. So when you come out, you're like, surprise. But oftentimes your CGM isn't connecting right away, right? So even when you put your pump back on, you turn everything back on. This is where the finger stick is so important because you don't know. So I get that ready. I do a finger poke and kind of see where I'm sitting at. And then I'm going to take, once I reconnect my pump, I'm going to take a small bolus of my missing insulin. Chances are I'm going to be a bit higher, and I know I'm going to go higher. So I may add or I may top up a little bit and just see kind of what's happening, right? Depending on if it was a really chill dive, I might be a little bit higher. If it was more active, I might be nicely right in range and happy. But again, you don't know what's going on down there, so it's a bit of a surprise when you come up. So and then again, just knowing how much, how like whether there was a lot of exertion. It's kind of like other exercise in the sense that you've had your pump off, and if it was a very relaxed dive, and you kind of go with the current, those are really nice ones. Chances are you're going to go high afterwards, so I give a little more insulin. And I'm going to be dehydrated, so making sure I'm having water and lots of it, because that's going to cause me to go high. And especially salt water, and you don't think about this, but you sweat when you're doing it. So making sure, and you don't feel that, right? You don't feel the sweat, but just making sure you're drinking a lot of water. And that is sort of how I go. Now, the one time that I've had to not dive was I did a multi-day, it was called a live aboard, where I lived on a big yacht and we went for 3 days and we did 6 dives a day and it was the coolest experience. However, when you take your pump off 6 times a day, by the end, my blood sugar was just like creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. And then by the end of the day after dinner, my blood sugar was like 250. I was like, nope, I can't do this night dive. Like I'm shooting to the moon. I need to call it. So I didn't do the dive and I was really sad. I was standing on the top of the boat looking down and there was light and you could see, and it was actually a shark dive. So everyone was diving with sharks and lights and it was the coolest experience. It was actually really neat that I got to see it from the top because the water was so clear and this was all in the Great Barrier Reef. But I was bummed that I didn't get to go. But then the next day I swam with sea turtles the next night. So that was really cool. And I took photos for people on their cameras. They're like, oh, if you see anything cool. And they were like, oh, you saw all the sharks. And I'm like, yeah, they were very close to you all. Some of them they didn't realize because the sharks were above them and they were underneath, but it was a very cool experience. So yeah, a couple of lessons I've sort of learned throughout my time of having diabetes and I've traveled a lot. I've done like a 5-month backpacking trip in Africa, in places that had no electricity whatsoever. I have skied kind of all around the world in Australia, New Zealand, South Korea. I've, backcountry camping and canoeing where you have nothing and it's rained the entire time. That was a new one for me that I learned this summer, that you need to make sure you have everything waterproofed because your battery pack will not work when water gets in there. So just all of these things, and some of these are worst case scenarios. So some lessons: glucagon is useless in your hotel room. If you are out adventuring, doesn't make sense to have it there, but it does make sense to have it on your body. And this is a big one. Quick little story: I was traveling in Africa, and we were in Mozambique, and this is actually where I learned to scuba dive, in Mozambique of all places. But the only way in and out of where we were staying was walking, and it was along the beach to get into the little town. It's the most amazing, beautiful place. And glucagon was back with all my stuff in the hotel, and it was a 2-kilometer, what is that? Like, I don't know, miles.
Little
1.5
over?
miles?
Yeah,
What?
something like that. A little
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, but we had done that walk a couple times during the day. So we'd gone in for lunch and to check out kind of just the little town. Then we'd gone back. So that was like 4 kilometers, so almost 2 miles. And then we'd done it again. So the activity was kind of building up and kind of adding up. And so we went in and we went in for dinner and went to this little restaurant. And I was like, ooh. You know when you have those lows, I mean, you probably know where it just like, bam, hits you. You're like, fine, fine, fine. And then all of a sudden you're low. It was one of those. And this is before I had a CGM. So just was finger poking. And I remember looking at a friend of mine and she looked at me and my face was just pure white as a ghost, like one of those lows. And it hit so quickly and I couldn't really say anything except Coca-Cola. So I looked at her, she looked at me, and I said, Coca-Cola. And she knew what that meant. She's like, oh, Julie is low. So she jumped up, leapt over this like little retaining wall. And this is all in the sand, right? Like there's no roads or anything. There's no pavement. It's all sandy kind of area. Ran over to this little stall, stole Coca-Cola bottles, ran back to me, and I just chugged both of them. And after both of them, my blood sugar was 40 after 2 regular Cokes. Okay. Yeah. So I was really, really low. And that was kind of when I thought, okay, my glucagon is back in the hotel. It's great that I brought it with me, but what would happen if those didn't work? So now I've started carrying it kind of on my person with me when I do those activities and adventures, or it's with the person that I'm with. So with mom, or dad, or my partner. So that's been a big lesson, just keeping it close by. Um, Technology malfunctions, as I said, this summer I guided a canoe trip and it rained for 3 straight days, and most of my stuff got wet, including my battery pack to charge my pump. And it was just the seal on the thing that I was using, so checking that out. But luckily, my friends were there and everyone had diabetes, so somebody else had a battery pack. But just knowing that, you're going to be taking a trip, but that's when your pump's going to die, right? That's when that's going to happen. That's when you're going to go through 3 pods, right? When normally, so taking extras, thinking about what are you going to do with your tech. If you need to waterproof it, making sure the things you're using are actually waterproof. I know sometimes we use those things to put our phones in and stuff and we think they're waterproof. You need to check those out before you go so it doesn't get ruined. Because that's the time when it's gonna get ruined, when you can't fix it. I say your buddies, but your parents or your partners or your friends need to carry low supplies or your pump supplies on them. So if you're traveling, you're not the only one that has them, because I know we've used all of our low supplies and then realized we need more. So somebody else has to carry low supplies. And Emma, this is something like as you grow up and you're not with your mom all the time, you'll realize like you'll 100% have a low where you eat all your low supplies and you're still low and you need more. So hopefully you've got a best bud who will happily carry some fruit snacks. Yeah, you do? Oh, awesome. We'll carry fruit snacks, for you.
Yeah, she has her best friend has some stuff in her backpack. So
Amazing.
us, she's got her. So
That's awesome. And it's so important, but also in that same sense, when I was traveling and when I've been traveling, is I give them a little pack with my cartridges, pump sites, a sensor, and they have that in their stuff with them, just in case I lose everything, right? Along those lines is the next point. Like the worst case scenario will happen, so plan for it. Perfect example, I was in Africa. A lot of stuff happened when I was in Africa because it was a long trip. My girlfriends all had bags, like their big pack full of all these outfits and clothes. And I had like one t-shirt and, 900 pump sites. So like I had to plan for all of these things. But I was taking a shower. I had my pump attached to my pants and I put it up like outside the shower, and I was taking a shower and someone stole my pants with my pump attached to it. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I thought, okay, so how did I plan for that? So I did. I had a plan for that scenario. One was pens, right, with insulin. And the other one was that I had a credit card that had $7,000 of open credit that I could get a plane ticket from anywhere in the world to go home, or to go to a place where I could purchase what I needed, because we were in the middle of nowhere. We were in Malawi, and you really can't buy insulin there. So that was kind of that worst case scenario. It was like I have all these layers of planning, and that was sort of the final one, that I carried this card and I had it kind of hidden in a spot that if I needed to, I could go to a travel agent and I could get out. So, but yeah, planning for the worst case scenario is sometimes literally, sitting down and thinking about those things, and again, talking to people who have done those adventures beforehand, to help you kind of plan all of these things. And if you're with people that have experience, or you're doing it with a camp, or you're doing it with an organization, they will do most of this planning for you. And that's a really great opportunity to learn from others, because then you can take what you learn and go and do it kind of on your own and with your own friends. So I lived in South Korea for a year and I taught English. And so I couldn't take a travel pump with me. They didn't want me to take one. My family actually ended up mailing me a pump. It was a very precarious situation. But this describes diabetes. They have this tandem bike. And on further inspection, this was the saying on it: 1 + 1 = more than 2. And I feel like that is diabetes in a nutshell, that it's never 1 + 1 = 2. It's always something. So that's my little diabetes travel motto, is kind of thinking ahead. Um, oh, I love Korea. I loved it so much. But yeah, so that's kind of, I just sort of wanted to go through and talk about how I assess risk and how I go about planning. And I thought scuba dive being a cool example with the water and kind of that extreme kind of situation. But it really works for sort of, smaller local activities that, or just something new that you want to try, is kind of thinking through all those steps. And one of the big ones I think is that mitigation of like, what are your cutoff points? When do you say no? That's a really hard one living with diabetes, because we tell ourselves, oh yeah, we can do everything, and we sure can. We just got to plan and plan and plan. But sometimes diabetes has a mind of its own, and you have to know before you're in those situations when to kind of step out, because it's really hard to make the decision in the moment. So that's, I guess, my biggest takeaway from activities and adventure. And I have a couple of links that I wanted to share. This is newer, that's come out in December. It was exercise guidelines for automated insulin delivery. They have some new guidelines for all of the pump systems, depending on the direction of arrow, kind of how to treat with carbs and what to do. It used to be exercise guidelines just in general, but this is more specific. So that's a really great resource. And then I did the Diving Alert Network, in case anyone is considering scuba diving. But yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Let's chat
Julie,
about.
will you send me those 2 links and I will send them out in our recording email tomorrow?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So Alexis, I know that was probably, you're like, "Oh, that's a lot of info."
All the things. Yeah, we're in the early stages for
Mhm.
sure. No, it's really helpful. I think just kind of some takeaways from a very newbie perspective is just, yeah, the planning stuff. I mean, right now we're kind of like not hunkering down. Our youngest is diagnosed with leukemia too, so we're just kind of like hunkering down in life, especially with all the sickness going on. But yeah, certainly when summer comes up, it's really nice to just have some of these tips and tools of like, yeah, planning, looking at risks, looking at having people around, carry and support things. I love the gel packs; those have been recommended to us to get some of those. So certainly, like a lot of the things that you've shared, we probably won't go diving tomorrow, kind of thing, but in the future, this will be a really helpful resource. And if the recording is shared, certainly something that we can look at in the future.
Swimming is a big one too with insulin
Yeah,
pumps. Like Omnipod, for example, the Amazon is totally different. You can wear the pod and you go and swim, whereas my pump, I have to take it off. It's not waterproof. I've actually found that to be the most frustrating thing. So, and is your daughter, is she on injections right now, or did they?
yep, she's just
Yeah.
on injections. Yep, we haven't started the Omnipod yet. It's not, I mean, at this time she's saying she doesn't want it. I'm sure that will change, but yeah, that's the route in the future. Go.
So one thing with injections is that your long-acting insulin, once it's injected, it's in, right? So you can't change that. Whereas on pumps, we can, like I mentioned, taking the pump off for an hour beforehand. So for her, she's really, having those carbs and those snacks are going to be really important when she has really active days, because you can't really change anything unless you're thinking about it way, way, way ahead. Um, which is sometimes hard to do, is to plan, 2 days from now, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. So,
Yeah,
and especially swimming and being in the water and running around on the beach, on the sand, walking on the sand, far more active than just walking. So
yeah,
just that increase in activity level is going to mean, more carbs at meals and more carby snacks, that kind of stuff. You'll notice
you sure.
just a trend in lower blood sugar. So
You bet.
yeah, the good times of, and just like being relaxed and happy and being by the water, I find just brings my blood sugars just like down, because I'm like, ah, it's so great. No stress. So, yeah. Any thoughts or questions or things you want to chat about while we're here?
No, yeah, just soaking it all in. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the gel packs, like certain brands, certain ones that you recommend versus others, does it matter?
Yeah, they're So, I mean, I'm an adult and I use like ones that people use for running. I use like goo and stuff, but some of them have caffeine in them. So just be very
Okay.
aware, yeah, that you're buying ones without caffeine.
Okay,
Um,
good to know.
Same also with hydration tabs. I didn't realize this, and when I went to Colorado, I was like, "Why is my heart racing so much?" Because I bought um, electrolyte drop-in tabs, and they had a ton of caffeine in them, and and then I went to higher elevation, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening?" Because I drank the equivalent of like 10 cups of coffee with my electrolytes. Yeah, that was before Colorado City when we met. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It was terrible. I was like, I'm having a heart attack. Nope, just caffeine electrolytes. So watch out for that.
Julie, I had a parent who wrote me questions to ask
Yeah.
you this meeting tonight. So, her and her 7-year-old are going to Kauai, in a couple of months.
Cool.
They're gonna do a tubing excursion, and she sent me the link. It looks like it's like a 3-hour kind of like river tubing thing. And so she wants advice specifically on managing the tubing experience with a Moby pump.
Hmm.
And do you have any recommendations on like what to do to make sure the Moby and the pump are okay, kept dry? Um, and sugar snacks, I imagine you would probably recommend gels again. But yeah, any thoughts on those
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, same, I mean, same recommendation with the spy belt and the gel packs because they are pretty good even if they're bumped and moved or like they'll stay intact. Whereas I have found I've tried fruit snacks. Nope, water gets in those, and then they get disgusted. Yep, tried. Really, that's the best thing is a gel pack. Nothing's getting in there. And with the Moby is waterproof, so you can go do your thing. But I know that people are using kin tape to kind of, if is it on her arm, like wrap the kin tape fully and completely over it so that it doesn't come off. Um, because that's more so what I is it like a almost like a lazy river tubing? Does it say?
It didn't look too crazy intense,
Okay.
but I can't say for sure.
Yeah. So that would be something too. And if it's not that active, like I'm picturing like I'm not picturing like a tubing behind a boat where you might go flying off. Like I feel like that's not what they mean. So I'm, like you probably don't need to do a ton of diabetes management things unless they're doing a lot of swimming. Maybe back off, talk to the team about backing off their basal a little bit, but the system should kind of take care of you depending on what they're doing. But yeah, kin tape, wrap it all the way around is
And
my
what is kin? Kin tape?
yeah, it's almost it's almost like tensor band-aid material, but it's really sticky on one side, and people use it for injuries. But you can buy it, and it's in a roll, so you could take it and like roll it all the way around.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's probably will that'll work. Oh wait,
Per-
do you have yeah, some good tape right here.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's cute. It's got hearts on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so like this one, it's kind of, we wrap
yeah.
it around, or you have the actual like kinesiology tape that is,
Yeah, the actual kin tape is probably a little bit thicker, and is that
yeah,
where like the tensor? Yeah,
yeah. And this one,
yeah.
thicker to put around it, but it helps even
Mhm.
like the pool with the
Yeah,
pump,
just
so
wrapping
it
it.
doesn't come off.
Fabulous.
Cool. Yeah, it works really well. I know a lot of people that use it, yeah. And especially with salt water, I find salt water just like eats the pump sites and eats everything off. So putting like using skin tack, I like putting that on and then putting the site on and then putting the thing on top to really just get her on there. I find. But I'm also in a G6, so I find that just sticks really well. That's actually one of the reasons why I did go to a G7 is it just sticks on me really well. And I've heard people like, are you on the G7, Emma?
No.
You're on
She's
the
on
G6.
6 and hers did start to come up in Hawaii, so we put like a patch on and everything.
Mhm.
to keep
Yeah.
it
Yeah, same. The patches. But I find because the G7 I find it's like it's so small around and you have to put a patch on anyways, but it like salt water just eats all that off. It's gone like so easily. So, but yeah.
Does anyone have any final questions for Julie?
And I'm really excited that you're using that like little underwater like bubble scoot thing. It's
Yeah.
gonna be so cool.
It'll, it'll be an experience. So, well, thank you
So
for the information. It's really great.
yeah, hopefully we get to see you soon. Are you doing any camps or anything at all? Is that something you're into?
Well, so there's a Camp Colorado, which is like a diabetes camp that I go to
Cool.
every summer.
Nice. That's
You
awesome.
just did right in on insulin. So,
I used to work for many years for Riding on Insulin, actually. I planned all their international trips back in the day. So, yeah, I know that whole crew. It's a good one. It's fun. It's a good time. Cool. Oh, Alexis. Bye, Alexis. Oh, sorry. She wrote something.
She just said she was hopping off.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Wow. 2 weeks. Thinking back to that time, Heather. Oh, my goodness. That's anyway. Well, thank you so much for having me. Sydney, I'll send you the links
Oh.
for those two resources. And again, the AID exercise guidelines, they're brand new, so that they're very helpful. If you're interested in those, it just helps you with directional arrows and what to do. So, yeah, cool.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Heather and Emma, it was nice to see you again for the second time today. I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Yeah, nice to meet you both. And take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
You guys.